Today is day 2 of our Jen Aranyi inspired landscapes. Let's take a second to look at these beautiful colors that she puts into her backgrounds, and we are going to do that with watercolor. Today you are going to need your artwork from day 1 and a disposable cup that you could use to rinse out your brush with, and so it might get a little watercolor on it. You're going to need your tray of watercolor, and I also like to use the top of my tray so I can mix some colors in. And don't forget to finish up any of the detailing work in your Sharpie marker before we begin using our watercolor today. We should have that foreground, middle ground, and background, and all of the outlining on those pencil lines if you need them, because once we start applying our watercolor, it's going to be awful hard to come back in on wet watercolor to do your Sharpie work. So we are going to be using a technique that is called wet on wet. The purpose of this technique is to get that beautiful blending that Jen Aranyi uses in her skies. So what we're going to do is we're going to wet our paper with our clean water everywhere where we want our color to be. So that means I'm carefully outlining where I want across my mountains, to the edge of where my Sharpie line is for the end of the picture. And only those areas, being careful not to get the wet water into my mountains or in my borders. So you could be using your circle or your triangle, but you're going to pay special attention to only put water into that inside area where the sky is going to be. This technique is really cool because it allows the water to move freely into that area. So when we put pigment, the pigment will only go into those areas and it won't go over into the dry areas of our paper. Now that I've made a nice layer of water, I'm going to pick a smart color scheme. We're going to pick an analogous, so red, orange, yellow. These colors are side by side on the color wheel. Yellow, green, blue, like I am going to be using, also side by side on the color wheel. You pick an analogous side by side on the color wheel color scheme for your sky. So again, I would pick the lightest color of this analogous color scheme. For me, if I'm going to be using yellow, green, and blue, yellow is my lightest value. So I am going to start with that color first. Lots of times that color is going to be hard to kind of keep, so I want to make sure that I get a lot of that color in one area before I move on to my next color. So now I'm going to start to apply my next color, and now you can see where the magic happens. It will start to bleed into that other color and create this awesome only watercolor can give you technique of this wet on wet. As it starts to spill, it does its own thing. So just kind of let that happen. I want to be careful. I don't want to cover up my lightest value, which is yellow. I'm just going to let that green start to bleed into that yellow naturally. And then I'll move on until my next color. So I'm going to use blue because again, that's the next color on the color wheel. And as I start to add that blue, you can see it starts to make like a teal kind of color, which is really beautiful and cool. Watercolor always dries a little bit lighter than what you expect. So don't worry if your colors get a little dark, it will lighten up. Oh, did you see that? How cool is that when it just kind of spills over and happens? I love it. So I'm going to continue on and build up again the same way I did on the right side, my left side. So I'm going to start to pull in the darker blues into the corner and just kind of let the watercolor kind of seep and move around. Now I'm kind of helping and assisting my watercolor creep into those edges, but be very careful. You do not want to get that watercolor into your mountains because again, we want to kind of mask that area off and control it so we only keep that watercolor into the sky. I'm going to keep going on this, and then I'll do my other versions when I speed up. So I can show you some other color combinations that you might want to do in your background.